Boris Johnson is doing something he hopes will win back some favour.
Expected to announce a move back to Imperial Measurements to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee.
They needed to move the news cycle on from Partygate, and it cost them £30 million of taxpayer money to do it. Ladies and gents, welcome back to Punk Politics, or rather a Punk Light. So not a full episode of Punk Politics, just some sort of thoughts. Just a story for you really today. I like to think of this story, and it is a story in the newspapers as of today, at time of recording, but it is a perfect example of everything that is wrong with the modern Conservative Party. Would you like to hear it? Little story? Okay, let's do it. So this story begins in May 2022. Desperate to move on from the scandal that was Partygate, Boris Johnson and his then Minister for Brexit Opportunities, Jacob Rees-Mogg, they announced exciting new plans to take us back to the 1970s by abandoning metric and returning to imperial measures. Now, I'm sure that most of you watching this will be thinking, like, you'll be very aware of what imperial was and how we moved to metric, but just for the benefit of those few who aren't, we used to measure things in things like, yards and ounces, and then when we joined what was the EU, but like the original version of that, we moved into metric, just like 95% of the rest of the developed world. Nobody uses imperial. Everyone's moved on to metric. Now, this idea didn't just come from nowhere, right? Jacob Rees-Mogg, his personal staff in his parliamentary office were instructed by him to only use imperial terminology. And that was back in 2019, before that general election. I should also mention, a little caveat here, he also told his staff to identify people who were not members of the aristocracy by putting Esquire at the end of their name. What possible value could you take from knowing whether or not somebody was a true blue-blooded member of the aristocracy? Like, why do you need to know that? Well, I just think I just think it would be helpful, if you could just label people. If you could just let me know who is and who is not blue-blooded aristocracy, it would just be very, very, very helpful to me personally. Of course, reports that Mogg's staff labelled him with their own choice of terminology at the end of his name remain unconfirmed. Now, remember, this is the guy, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was challenged with seeking out Brexit opportunities, right? And that means geopolitical trade, that means global stage, negotiations, being amiable to your foreign counterparts, finding new ways of working together. But still, this guy's like, no, I don't care if nobody else uses it. We're using imperial, so you're all going to have to dance to our tune. Like, what a cosmic... I mean, it's just... like, what? Why is it always the flag-waving patriots that make you so ashamed of your country, So anyway, late May 2022... they float the idea, they brief it out against industry advice, against common sense. Yeah. F business indeed. And they seemingly solely do this because I guess they think that it will appeal to a sort of ignorant, plebby class of boomers who, after the Brexit vote, I guess they think they remain drunk on nostalgia of a Britain that used to be. Back in the days when Britain was still great. And look, just as a sort of side note, like, this is actually one of the things that we should be the most angry about, is the caricaturing. It's like they obviously hold their voters in such contempt that they think they could just reel off detrimental policy for absolutely no benefit, and people will just look the other way because you wave a flag the right way and hark back to imperial measures. It's like, oh, don't worry about Partygate. Oh no, that'll blow over. All we got to do is just give them a nice new blue passport and talk about imperial. They're witless oiks. They'll fall for it. Don't worry. It's like in my better moments, I no longer blame people necessarily for being hoodwinked by the Tories, by Brexit. But I do confess that in my lesser moments, I do still hold back some secondary contempt. Like, if you still vote Tory when they treat you like an idiot like this, then I'm sorry, I reserve the right to still also hold you in contempt. So I don't know where you go from there. You got contempt at all. You like contempt squared. So anyway, look, May 2022. So they briefed the idea, and the UK's media, never late to filate, quickly jump on this runaway freight train of bullshit and belligery. We're talking shares, comments, phone-ins, division. Oh Lord, it's good TV. You know, you've got front page bits in the Times. Jeremy Vine is taking calls on it. Good Morning Britain have got Mark Francois versus some nice lady from the Green Party. The Telegraph are championing it as a return to common sense. It's all over the news, broadsheets, television, and it's great news for the Tories because it's not, it's not Patterson or Partygate, right? Score! And that is what all of this is, right? Like, he's come through this period of scandal. They needed to recapture the front pages and the paper reviews. So they dream up this policy and brief it out, and the UK's media play along accordingly. And this was called out at the time by Baroness Jenny Jones on the Good Morning Britain thing with Mark Francois. She outright describes it as a distraction, a dead cat. The Lib Dems focus on the fact that this is going through consultancy phases, and they say this is a ludicrous waste of taxpayers' money. But neither of them are listened to, and the policy, the consultation then goes ahead. Now remember, this is important, just to bear in mind the context of this. Nobody in the industries that this is going to affect adversely, nobody is asking for this. Schools in the UK where our children are they're not learning Imperial, they're just learning metric measurements, meters, centimeters. 95% of the world doesn't know what Imperial is. They're all using metric as well. And whenever anyone is pushed or challenged to provide a reason why we're doing this, all they can offer is a vague and ambiguous taking back control. But still, the brief is out, and it must be reported on. It must be thrashed out and argued over, debated, and most important of all, it must be consulted on. Now, I mentioned a minute ago that this was shortly after Patterson, when Boris Johnson tried to disband the Standards Committee to get Patterson off. Now, thanks largely to some hugely critical Daily Mail front pages, for which they shortly afterwards fired their then editor, a guy called Geordie Greig, the Tory poll lead over Labour truly collapsed for the first time. That was in November 2021. Then you had Christmas, and then you had the Partygate stories. So, as the poll lead collapses, as Boris Johnson's Conservative Party are desperate to recapture the front pages with anything that is not a scandal, out comes this ridiculous policy idea that nobody's asked for and will prove to be of no material benefit to anybody it touches. Now, not long after this, Boris Johnson was ejected from power. Hooray, right? But by that point, the consultation is underway, and now it must go through to analysis and planning and gathering feedback and all of these other stages that government consultancies go through, and all of that costs millions. Now, that consultancy has now come to a close, and the government haven't revealed how much it cost. I think that by itself is quite interesting. Like, why wouldn't you, shouldn't that be in the sort of budget bit of the Gov UK documentation? But anyway, for reasons best known to themselves, they've decided not to reveal how much this consultancy cost. However, if it is a small to medium-sized government consultancy, the estimates are that this could have cost anywhere from 5 to 10 million up to 50 million pounds. Now here is the thing, just backdrop that against all of the rhetoric that you hear from whoever happens to be the Chancellor of the day. A Jeremy Hunt, a Kwasi Kwarteng, a George Osborne. And think about the many, many times you've heard these individuals say, well, we'd love to help these people out, or, we'd love to do this, but there just isn't any money, guys. They have to slash universal credit. They can't afford asylum seekers. People on benefits are just scroungers. No, we can't afford your 40 new hospitals. There's just not any money, guys. When it's in their interest, there is no limit to the funds that they can funnel out if it means that they can distract us or muddy the waters to change the narrative, capture the headlines. No, you can't have a replacement concrete for all the rack we signed off 7 years ago when we should have doubled the school maintenance budget. But 30 odd million for a policy nobody asked for and that was doomed to fail? Oh, sure. Where its only perceivable value was that it distracted people from the previous scandals? That is all this is, truly. This is just whoever is the Prime Minister, and maybe to some extent managing the Treasury like the Exchequer, whoever are those two people, it's just them using public money to pay their way out of whatever is the embarrassment for that week. They needed to move the news cycle on from Partygate, and it cost them £30 million of taxpayer money to do it. And now, where are we? As of the news reports this morning, following said consultation, it now turns out the government will be completely abandoning the move back to Imperial. Because 98 or 99% of respondents to its questionnaires that they send out to figureheads, thought leaders from the retail sectors, 99% of respondents said, no, actually, we're fine with metric. So what have we learnt here, people, in the journalism sector? Have we learnt to not just blindly retail out CCHQ's briefs? Have we learned to listen to the industry? Have we maybe learned to, instead of getting distracted, to just keep your eyes on the actual story? Or better still, pursue your own scoops and not function as a sort of a glorified third-party CCHQ publicist? Because that's basically what you're doing. Should the British media maybe press pause on its pathetic high-five and hand-job relationship with the Conservative Party? Could we not get to a place where political editors go in the lobby of Number 10 or whatever, and then they go, oh, hang on a second, no, wait a second, Prime Minister. Yeah, this seems like bullshit. And they either ask about the actual story, which in this case, I suppose, was Partygate, or challenge the government and say, why are you pursuing something of obviously such little benefit where everybody's told you not to do this and that they don't want it? I mean, I realise what have we learned is a sort of question that is lost on much of the journo-political class. If they didn't challenge or learn from Brexit, I suppose there's little chance that they would do so now with something as little as a unit of measure. I know I don't suppose this video or my tweet thread earlier will deliver much in the way of change to Fleet Street, but it should, I hope, at least, offer you all some embarrassment, if only a couple of ounces.